Before I get into Spectre, I want to specify that my rating system, which is the watch it if you want, it's a must watch, etc., is a way I rate movies because I feel like rating movies with numbers is what most people focus on, and I don't want people to focus on, oh, this movie got 2 out of 10 or 5 out of 10, it must be horrible. And why did I specify that? We'll talk about that later in the video. So Spectre was overall a decent movie. Although it of course has its flaws, that's more for spoiler talk. So let's get to it. How is the acting in this movie? Well, as we know, Daniel Craig is a solid actor, and to be honest, I don't know many of the other actors. There's just so many actors to keep track of that it's impossible for me to catch up on who is who. And yeah, I can check IMDb, but why would I? But yeah, overall, the acting was serviceable. I didn't really think people did a bad job. I think it was just overall decent acting. Alright, so let's get to the premise of the movie. So the premise is James Bond discovers a tape that the previous M, played by Judi Dench, sent to James Bond in case she ever died. And that is to, which I don't really think it's made clear why, but after James Bond murders him, he soon discovers that there's something much bigger than just that one assassin. So he takes it upon himself to look into whatever is going on. So let's look at the characters. Well, first of all, Daniel Craig's James Bond. Now we all know that these James Bond movies aren't really James Bond. And that's not Daniel Craig's fault, it's just how the script was written. But overall, Daniel Craig as James Bond is really a good match. They try to make James Bond more of a relatable character, and that's why he's more different than classic James Bond, because we all know that the regular James Bond is a sociopath, a psychopath, and all that good stuff. And granted, Daniel Craig's James Bond is also all that, but not as much. Then we have his new love interest, the new Bond girl. And to be honest, I don't really like her. And it's not that she was a bad actor or she was a bad character. Well, she kind of was. It felt like throughout the movie, she was just whatever the script needed her to be. For example, oh, okay, so this part of the movie, act like you're not interested in James Bond. Okay, now we're this part of the movie. Okay, now you can act like you're interested in him. She was pretty much just there for someone to sympathize for James Bond as he was completing the mission, because other than the James Bond girl, there's really no one else that is seeing what's going on to James Bond. And then the other character, I don't remember her name, but I put it on the screen. She was not in it that much, and I'm kind of disappointed. I really liked her character in Skyfall. She was pretty much just a different overall Bond girl, if you can call her that. And I think she's overall an interesting character. But then we got Q, which we all love Q. We love how he always has his complications with James Bond. The best part about him is that he is able to talk back to James Bond whenever James Bond does his classic talking down to him. And in this movie, he was treated as the comic relief character, which at least he wasn't annoying, because most of movies' problems when adding a comic relief character is that it's at the wrong time and they become annoying. But Q, thankfully, never came to that. And then we have New M, and he's alright. I mean, really, there's nothing much to say about him. Yeah, there's nothing much to say about him. So, of course, this movie is not going to have a lot of originality, and that's simply because these new James Bond movies are trying to build new origins for classic James Bond villains. So, if you thought that you wouldn't have much originality when you were watching Spectre, that's pretty much true. Alright, now let's really get into it. What was good about this movie? Well, first of all, that opening shot. As I mentioned before, whenever a director can pull off a one-shot scene, always gets my appreciation. Because again, those are really difficult to do. Also, there were some pretty good Easter eggs in this movie. But before I get into that, I'm going to put up a spoiler warning after this point. Skip to this part of the video if you don't want any spoilers. Alright, so there were plenty of Easter eggs that call back to the classic James Bond movies. For example, there was the side villain played by Dave Bautista. That is a callback to that other villain, the silent side villain that was in that movie, From Russia with Love. Also, the beginning of the movie, when it was the parade for Day of the Dead, James Bond was wearing a skull mask that probably is a callback to a villain from Live and Let Die. And of course, Spectre and Blofeld were the classic, iconic parts of James Bond. Now, this could be good or bad, depending on if you liked the classic James Bond movies, because this, I'd say, is the closest that a Daniel Craig James Bond movie has actually felt like a James Bond movie. You know, where he travels a lot, and he's meeting women and tracking down the head of any organization or any general villain. Now, now, if you haven't watched Doctor No, which was the first James Bond movie with Sean Connery, then you wouldn't know this, but I can definitely sense a lot of inspiration from Doctor No that was put into Blofeld. Of course, if you haven't already guessed, the villain in Spectre is Blofeld. So in Doctor No, they always kept him in the shadows. You didn't really see him until the very end. I mean, really, if you watch Doctor No, you'll know what I'm talking about. There's plenty of inspiration that was drawn from Doctor No. Alright, now what's bad about this movie? Well, there's plenty to be honest. So, first off, let's get into one of James Bond's, in general, movie problems. They always go for what's popular. For example, people generally liked the subplot where James Bond falls in love with a girl from Casino Royale. So basically, the writers went, well, people like that, so let's put this back in this movie. And then the opening. Oh man. Now, I'm not talking about the opening shot, because again, I love that. I meant the opening song and the visuals. First of all, I'm pretty sure I'm not the only one who thought of something like this when seeing all those tentacles. Now, don't get me wrong, I didn't want to think of it, but they were waving all those tentacles in your face. So it's kind of hard not to think about it. And also, going back to the popularity thing, Casino Royale. Everyone loved that opening theme, the one called You Know My Name. So when they tried to recreate that in Quantum of Solace, of course, people hated it. So they said, okay, let's try something new with Adele. Thus came Skyfall. People loved that. So they got Sam Smith to do a quite similar thing in this movie. And the song was alright, but it's definitely not one of the best. And I'm pretty sure I'm not the only one who thinks that Sam Smith's Writings on the Wall sounds similar to Michael Jackson's Earth song. A major misstep in this movie is the lack of screen time for Blofeld. Blofeld is one of the most iconic, probably the most iconic James Bond villain of the whole franchise. And really, he's really only in it 3 times. Once in that part of the trailer where he's completely in the darkness and he's just talking, and then the second time when he's torturing James Bond, and then the third time at the end, you see him get the scar, but it's pointless because he gets captured anyways. And he was very, very underwhelming. Now, here's what I mean. Blofeld in this movie falls victim to one of the worst villains you can have in a movie. And that's when the villains who always say, oh, you know that horrible thing that happened to you? I did that. Oh, you know that other horrible thing that happened to you? I also did that. There was a lot of that in this movie. But then, he never does anything. The worst he ever does is try to impair all of James Bond's senses, but that really doesn't build up to anything. He drills 2 holes behind James Bond's ears, which you can see he's in extreme pain, but then after that, it's like he's completely fine, meaning it really didn't affect James Bond at all. And sure, he kidnapped Bond's love interest, but that cliché's been done to death. And of course, I got excited when I saw him with his iconic eye scar. But really, that seems kind of pointless. He gets it, and then pretty much right after that, he gets captured anyways. And maybe if he returns in the next movie, because I think Daniel Craig has one more James Bond movie after this. But if he doesn't show up, then really it's just a massive disappointment and really doesn't affect the story at all. I mean, he doesn't even see that mad at him. He just acts normal, like, oh yeah, that happened. Oh well, can't help it. You would think he'd be more furious with him, and I think that would have made him at least a little more better, trying to make him more threatening, but no, he's just completely normal even after James Bond blew up his base, or whatever that was, and just underwhelming. Now, another major problem I have with this movie is the Bond girl. As mentioned, I think that she was just whatever the script needed. She needed to feel bad for James Bond, now she doesn't want him. Now she does. Oh look, she's not an assassin anymore, maybe James Bond, you could follow in her footsteps. That was pretty much what I felt she was the whole time. And again, it's just copying what happened in Casino Royale, except she doesn't die. Overall, I think her character could have been switched out with really anyone, or really didn't need to be here at all. Another problem is the movie just drags. At first, the opening shot, it gets you hyped, you are in, you're ready for the excitement, but really it feels like the movie just drags on and on and on. There's some action scenes, yeah, but those are really far apart. There's a lot of talking about stuff that we really don't care about, which leads me to my next point. There's not enough emphasis for why we should care about this chase. Now, James Bond fans, like myself, will already be excited that we're going to see Spectre and Blofeld. But think about those people who don't know who these characters are. They're just not going to care why all this stuff is happening. They won't know who anyone is, and to them, it'll seem kind of pointless. So, yes, this movie has good things, but a lot of bad things. And this is where I come to the point I mentioned earlier in the video. My rating system is made for people to watch a movie they want to watch or they shouldn't watch. When people focus on numbers for ratings, that alone can make someone determine if they want to watch it or not. So that's why I have my own rating system. But for your benefit, I'm going to say what I would rate this as in numbers. And that would be a 6 out of 10. Is it an average movie? Kind of. Is it a bad movie? Not really. Is it a great movie? Definitely not. But as in my rating system, I would give it a watch it if you want. Because James Bond fans, whether they like Daniel Craig as James Bond or not, they might still want to see this movie. They might want to see Spectre and Blofeld, and even though all that is underwhelming, it's still fun enough to watch for a James Bond fan. So what did you think of Spectre? Did you like it? Did you think it was a piece of crap? Did you think it was great? Comment below. Let me know what you thought. Like and subscribe if you want. I mean, if you think I'm just a boring person who you just don't care about, then don't bother. But I do appreciate every like and subscriber. If you have any complaints on how I make videos or anything of that sort, feel free to comment and let me know so I can change it. So that's it for this video, and I'll see you in the next one.